I never thought I'd be the kind of man to suspect his own wife. I always believed in trust, in loyalty, in the unbreakable bond that marriage was supposed to be. But life has a way of proving you wrong, of showing you that the things you take for granted can crumble in an instant. It started with something small, a glance, a laugh, a moment that, at the time, seemed harmless. My wife, Laura, had always been friendly with my best friend, Ryan. They had known each other for years, almost as long as she and I had been together. I introduced them after all. We had always been a trio, the three of us hanging out, grabbing drinks, laughing over stupid stories from our college days. But then things changed. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle. So subtle that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Ryan started coming over more often. At first, I didn't think anything of it. He had always been welcome in our home. But then I started noticing little things, like how Laura always seemed to know when he was going to drop by, how she would casually mention, "Oh, I bet Ryan's coming over soon," moments before he knocked on the door. How she laughed just a little too hard at his jokes that weren't even that funny. How she looked at him, not in an obvious way, not in a way that would make anyone else raise an eyebrow. But I noticed. I started seeing the way her eyes lingered on him when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear whenever he walked into the room. The way she always seemed more alive when he was around. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Ryan was my best friend. My best friend. We had known each other since college. He had been my best man at our wedding. He wouldn't do something like that. And Laura? We had been married for 8 years. She loved me. She wouldn't betray me. Would she? The doubt festered. It started eating away at me, making me notice even more things, like how Laura would get texts late at night, and when I asked who it was, she would casually say, "Oh, just Ryan?" Like how sometimes, when I came home from work, she would be in the middle of a conversation with him on the phone, her voice just a little too soft, her smile just a little too bright. And then there was the night that changed everything. I had stayed late at the office, trying to wrap up a project that had been dragging on for weeks. By the time I got home, it was nearly midnight. I pulled into the driveway, exhausted, just wanted to crawl into bed beside my wife. But when I walked inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I checked the living room. Empty. The kitchen dark. Then I noticed something strange. The back door was unlocked. A cold prickle ran down my spine. Laura never left the back door unlocked. Never. Something was wrong. I stepped outside, my heart pounding in my chest. The backyard was dimly lit by the glow of the porch light, casting long, eerie shadows over the grass. And then I saw it. Movement. By the garden. Near the shed. A figure. 2 figures. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might throw up. I moved closer, stepping as silently as I could across the yard. My breath shallow. My hands clammy. The voices were hushed, almost like whispers carried by the wind. One of them was Laura. The other was Ryan. A sharp chill ran down my spine. I couldn't make out their words, but the way they stood, the way they leaned toward each other, I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. I could have walked away. I could have pretended I didn't see anything, gone inside, convinced myself I was overreacting. But something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. Their heads jerked up, eyes wide, caught in the act. Laura's face went pale. Ryan took a step back. I stared at them, my blood roaring in my ears. What the hell is going on? Laura opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, looking anywhere but at me. I waited. I waited for an explanation. I waited for one of them to say something, anything to make this all make sense. But all I got was silence. And in that silence, everything became clear. Something was happening. Something had been happening. And now, I had proof. I clenched my fists, my whole body trembling. Laura finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jake, it's not what you think." I let out a hollow laugh. "Really?" Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. Ryan took a step forward, his hands raised as if to calm me down. "Man, just listen." "No." My voice came out cold sharp. "You don't get to talk." Ryan flinched. Laura reached out toward me, but I stepped back. I couldn't be near her. Not right now. Not after this. I trusted you, I said, my voice shaking. She opened her mouth again, but I didn't wait to hear whatever excuse she had. I turned and walked back into the house, slamming the door behind me. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, staring at the darkened television screen, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Laura and Ryan, standing there in the backyard, whispering, leaning into each other like two people with a shared secret. A secret I wasn't supposed to know. I wanted to storm upstairs, to demand answers, to force Laura to tell me exactly what the hell was going on. But I knew she would lie. It's not what you think. Her words echoed in my head, over and over. Then tell me, Laura, what am I supposed to think? At some point, exhaustion won. I passed out on the couch, only to wake up a few hours later to the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. I sat up, my neck stiff, my body aching from sleeping in the wrong position. Laura was there. She turned when she saw me, her face cautious, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt? Fear? Both? Morning, she said softly. I didn't answer. She hesitated, then walked over, placing a cup of coffee on the table in front of me. I thought you might need this. I stared at it, but didn't touch it. She shifted on her feet. You didn't come to bed last night. I let out a cold laugh. Yeah, I wonder why. She swallowed hard. Jake, we need to talk. I finally looked at her, my jaw tight. Do we? She sighed, rubbing her temples like this whole situation was exhausting for her. Last night was exactly what it looked like. I cut in, her lips parted, her breath hitching. No, Jake. It wasn't. I stared at her, waiting. She hesitated. Then, finally, she sat down across from me, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. It's not what you think, she said again. I clenched my teeth. Then explain it to me. She exhaled, like she was preparing for battle. Ryan and I were just talking. I scoffed. In the middle of the night? Whispering? In the backyard? You expect me to believe that? Her eyes flashed with something. Anger, maybe. Frustration. Yes, Jake. Because it's the truth. I shook my head. You're lying? She sucked in a breath, then let it out slowly. I didn't tell you because I knew how it would look. My blood ran cold. You didn't tell me what? She bit her lip. Ryan, he's been going through something. I narrowed my eyes. What kind of something? She looked down at the table. It's not my place to say. I slammed my fist against the wooden surface, making her jump. Then why the hell are you sneaking around with him, Laura? If you're not having an affair, then what the hell is going on? Her eyes filled with tears. I was just trying to help him. Help him with what? She hesitated. I stared at her, my heart pounding. And then she said something that made my stomach drop. He's in love with me. Silence. A long, suffocating silence. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. What? My voice was barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Ryan, he told me a few weeks ago. He said he's been in love with me for years. Since before we got married. My hands curled into fists. He said he never acted on it, never would. But he needed to get it off his chest. She let out a shuddering breath. I didn't know what to do, Jake. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would only make things worse. I laughed, but it was bitter and humorless. So instead, you decided to sneak around with him? To have secret late-night meetings? I wasn't sneaking around, she snapped. I was trying to convince him to move on, to let go of whatever feelings he had. I shook my head. And you expect me to believe that? She clenched her jaw. Yes, Jake, I do. Because it's the truth. I stared at her, my mind spinning. Ryan was in love with my wife. Had been for years. And she had known. I pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. Laura reached for me. Jake. I stepped away before she could touch me. I need to think, I muttered. She swallowed hard. You don't believe me? I didn't answer. Because the truth was I didn't know what to believe anymore. I drove home in a daze. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, but I barely felt it. My mind was too consumed with one thing. What if Laura had been lying to me this whole time? I had been so focused on Ryan, so furious, so betrayed, that I never even considered the possibility that Laura might not be as innocent as she claimed. But Ryan's words kept echoing in my head. She never pushed me away. She never told me to stop. My stomach churned. Had I been played? Had my own wife, my Laura, been leading him on while making me believe she was just a victim in all of this? I pulled into the driveway, but I didn't get out of the car right away. The house was dark except for a single light in the living room window. Laura was waiting for me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Then I stepped out of the car. When I walked in, Laura was sitting on the couch, her hands clasped together on her lap. She looked up immediately, her face pale, her eyes filled with something that almost looked like guilt. "You saw him," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her. She swallowed. "Well, what did he tell you?" I stepped closer, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "He told me you never told him to stop." She flinched. My chest tightened. "Is that true, Laura?" I asked, my voice low, dangerous. Her lower lip trembled. "Jake, don't lie to me." She shut her eyes, inhaling sharply. Then she whispered. I didn't encourage it. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "But you didn't stop it," I said through gritted teeth. Her silence was my answer. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing across the room. "Jesus Christ, Laura." She looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Jake. I swear. I never wanted." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I snapped. She swallowed hard. "Because I was scared." I turned on her, eyes burning. "Scared of what?" She hesitated. "Then, finally, that you would leave me." A sharp, cold pain spread through my chest. I stared at her, barely breathing. "So instead of telling me the truth," I said slowly, "you let me believe you were completely innocent." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was afraid, Jake." Her voice broke. "I was afraid of losing you." I clenched my fists. She wasn't just afraid of losing me. She was afraid of me finding out who she really was. I turned away from her, staring at the wall as rage, betrayal, and something else, something much worse, curled inside me. Disgust. I had been so damn blind. "You let me go after Ryan," I muttered. She froze. "You let me get angry at him. You let me hate him. And the whole time, you were just as guilty as he was." A choked sob escaped her lips. I shook my head. "You weren't a victim, Laura. You knew exactly what you were doing." She let out a shaky breath. "I never wanted to hurt you." I turned to face her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman sitting in front of me. I felt nothing for her. Not love, not pain, not even anger. Just nothing. "I don't care what you wanted," I said, voice hollow. "I'm done." Her breath hitched. "Jake." I didn't let her finish. I walked out. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Laura crying in the next room. But I didn't care. She deserved every tear. By morning, I had made my decision. I was leaving. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out without saying a word. As I climbed into my car, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the name on the screen. Ryan. I hesitated. Then I answered. "Jake." His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I exhaled sharply. "What do you want?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I clenched my jaw. "It's too late for that." "I know," he murmured. A heavy pause. Then, "I lost you, didn't I?" A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. "Yeah, Ryan, you did." I hung up, and I never spoke to him again. I didn't look back. Not at the house, not at her, not at the life I was leaving behind. As I drove, I felt like a ghost in my own skin. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breath even, but inside, I was crumbling. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had built my life around, gone. Laura wasn't the woman I thought she was. Ryan wasn't the friend I thought he was. And me? I was just the idiot who let it all happen. I checked into a small motel outside of town. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, and I needed that. I needed space. Time. I collapsed onto the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment over and over. Laura's face when I walked out, Ryan's voice on the phone died. The feeling of betrayal so deep, it made my skin crawl. I squeezed my eyes shut. I should have seen the signs. The way Laura had been distant for months. The way Ryan always made excuses to be around. The looks, the stolen glances I had brushed off as nothing. I had been blind, stupid. And now I was alone. 1 week later, I didn't respond to Laura's calls, or her texts, or the emails where she begged me to come home, begged me to listen. I didn't care anymore. She made her choice. Ryan made his, and I made mine. I spent my days drinking bad motel coffee and staring at the wall, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Everything in my life had revolved around her. Our home, our future. Now I had none of that. And the worst part? I didn't know if I even wanted to rebuild. I was numb, detached, empty, until I saw her. I was sitting at a diner, minding my own business, when I felt someone watching me. At first, I ignored it. But then, I turned, and there she was, Samantha, my ex, the woman I had been with before Laura. The woman I left because I thought Laura was the love of my life. Funny how things worked out. She was staring at me, her expression unreadable. I should have looked away. I should have pretended I didn't see her. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, and she walked over. "Jake," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her voice was the same, low, smooth, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. I hadn't seen her in years. "Sam," I said, setting down my coffee. "Long time." She studied me, tilting her head slightly. "You look like hell." I let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, well, it's been a rough week." She folded her hands on the table. I stiffened. "What?" Her lips pressed together. "Laura, Ryan, the whole town's talking about it." Of course they were. A scandal like this? In a small town? I should have known. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Great." She watched me carefully. "You okay?" I scoffed. "Do I look okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "Come with me." I blinked. "What?" She leaned forward, her voice softer now. "Come with me. Get out of this place. You need a fresh start, Jake." I frowned. "Sam, I'm serious." Her eyes locked onto mine. "You have nothing here. No reason to stay. So don't." I swallowed. "Leave. Just go." Could I? Did I want to? I hesitated, and she saw it. She reached across the table, her fingers barely brushing against mine. "You don't have to decide now," she murmured. "But think about it." Then, she slipped me a napkin with an address scribbled on it, and walked away. That night, I lay awake in my motel bed, staring at the ceiling, her words repeating in my head. "You have nothing here. No reason to stay. So don't." She was right. There was nothing left for me here. Laura had destroyed our marriage. Ryan had destroyed our friendship. I had nothing, except the chance to start over. I exhaled slowly, and made my decision. The next morning, I packed my bag, threw my phone into the motel trash can, and got in my car. I didn't look back, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. I barely slept that night. My mind was an endless loop of paranoia and unanswered questions. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Lisa and Eric, whispering, touching, laughing in a way that no wife should with another man, let alone my best friend. The next morning, Lisa acted as if nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, poured me coffee, and asked about my plans for the day like a perfect, doting wife. I played along. I needed to be smart about this. If she and Eric were betraying me, I needed to catch them in the act. That evening, I made an excuse about having to work late and left the house. But I didn't go to work. I drove a few blocks away, parked my car, and then walked back home through the side streets. I found a spot near our house where I could see inside through the living room window. I waited. My hands were sweating. My heart was a drum inside my chest. And then, Lisa's phone buzzed. She glanced around, making sure I wasn't there, then picked up. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the way her lips curled into a small, excited smile sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. A few minutes later, she grabbed her coat and left the house. I followed. She didn't take her car. Instead, she walked. Fast. like she was rushing to meet someone. I kept my distance, ducking behind trees and parked cars. My stomach twisted in knots. My brain screamed at me to turn around, to stop, that maybe I was overreacting. But I couldn't. Lisa turned down a quiet street and stopped in front of a house. Eric's house. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. She knocked. The door opened immediately. Eric. And the way they looked at each other, like two people who had been waiting all day to see each other, was all the proof I needed. I wanted to charge forward, to grab him by the collar, to scream at Lisa, demand answers. But I didn't, because if I barged in now, they would have excuses. Lies. I needed real proof. I needed to see what happened next. I moved closer, careful not to make a sound. The front door had closed, but a light was on upstairs. I circled around the side of the house, my heart pounding as I crouched near a window. And that's when I saw it. Lisa and Eric. In his bedroom. Her hands on his shoulders. His fingers sliding through her hair. A look in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Not for me. I felt like I was suffocating. My entire world, our marriage, our history, everything was crumbling right in front of me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. I had seen enough. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Lisa was about to learn that she wasn't as clever as she thought. And Eric? Eric was about to find out what it meant to betray his best friend. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, my mind racing, my stomach twisting with nausea. The images burned into my memory, Lisa's hands on him, the way she smiled at him, the way he touched her. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I should have seen the signs earlier. The way Eric had been hanging around more often. The way Lisa had started dressing up even when she had nowhere to go. The late-night messages. The random bursts of laughter when she checked her phone. I was a fool. But now, I had proof. I had everything I needed to confront them. The question was, how? Did I walk in, throw the photos in Lisa's face, and demand answers? Did I wait, act normal, and make her squirm under my silent knowledge? Did I go after Eric first? 1,000 scenarios played out in my mind, each one more tempting than the last. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. I finally pulled into the driveway, close to midnight. Lisa was already home. The lights were on, and I could see her in the kitchen, sipping a glass of wine like she didn't have a single care in the world. The sight of her made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and walked inside. She turned and smiled at me. "Hey, babe, you're home late." I forced a smile. "Yeah, work ran long." She nodded, sipping her wine. "You look tired." I wanted to laugh. "Tired? No, Lisa. I'm not tired. I'm angry. I'm betrayed." I walked past her, straight to the fridge, grabbing a beer. My hands were shaking. I hoped she didn't notice. She leaned against the counter, watching me. "Everything okay?" I met her gaze, testing her. Would she lie to my face? Would she pretend everything was fine? I took a sip of my beer. "Yeah, everything's fine." She smiled. "Good." Liar. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I was going to destroy them. But first I needed a plan, and when the time was right, they would never see it coming. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought. Today is the day. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I had spent the entire night replaying everything in my head. Lisa's betrayal, Eric's disloyalty, the proof I had in my phone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together in his bedroom, their hands all over each other. I had never felt rage like this before. It sat in my chest like a burning coal, refusing to let me breathe. Lisa was in the kitchen, making breakfast as if everything was normal. As if she hadn't snuck out last night to be with him. As if she wasn't the worst kind of liar. I stood in the doorway, watching her. She hummed to herself, flipping pancakes, completely unaware of the storm building inside me. I clenched my fists. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this. If I exploded now, she'd play the victim. She'd turn around on me. She'd lie her way out of it. No. I needed her to admit it. I needed her to dig her own grave. So I forced myself to smile. "Morning." She turned, surprised, and smiled back. Morning, babe. You slept in. I needed it, I lied. Rough night. She poured me a cup of coffee, sliding it across the counter. Yeah? You okay? I took a sip, watching her carefully. You had just been thinking? Her expression didn't change. Not even a flicker of guilt. She was good at this. Too good. I decided to push. I was actually thinking about Eric, I said casually. Haven't seen him in a while? She froze for half a second. A blink. A small shift in her posture. If I hadn't been watching for it, I would have missed it. She recovered quickly. Really? I thought you two grabbed drinks last week. Liar. I nodded. Yeah, but we haven't really hung out like we used to. You know, just the two of us. She turned back to the stove, flipping the last pancake onto a plate. Well, I'm sure he'd love to see you. Would he? Would my best friend love to see me after betraying me? I clenched my jaw. I had to end this, and I knew exactly how. That evening, I called Eric. Hey man, I said, keeping my voice light. You up for a drink? There was a pause. Then, yeah, sure. Everything okay? I smiled. Yeah, it's just been a while since we caught up. Another pause. He was nervous. Good. I gave him a time and place. A small, quiet bar away from our usual spots. Somewhere private. He agreed. And just like that, the trap was set. Eric arrived at the bar a few minutes before me. I watched from my car as he walked inside, looking around nervously. I let him wait, let him sweat. Then after 5 minutes, I walked in. He was at the bar, nursing a beer. He looked up as I approached, forcing a grin. Hey man. I sat down next to him. Hey. The bartender came over, and I ordered a whiskey. Eric shifted in his seat. So what's up? I took a sip, letting the silence drag out. Finally, I turned to him. You tell me? His brows furrowed. Huh. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low. You and Lisa. His whole body stiffened. I saw the panic flash in his eyes. He quickly tried to cover it. What about us? I smirked. Don't play dumb, Eric. He swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, turned it toward him, and let him see. The color drained from his face. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. And then, he made the dumbest mistake of his life. He tried to lie. Man, this isn't what it looks like. I laughed. A real, bitter laugh. Oh yeah? Then tell me, Eric, what exactly does this look like? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing. No words. Because there was nothing he could say. I leaned in. You were my best friend. I trusted you. His eyes dropped to the bar top. I shook my head. How long? He hesitated. I slammed my fist against the counter, making him jump. How long? His shoulders slumped. His voice was barely a whisper. 6 months? I felt my stomach twist. 6 months? Half a year of sneaking around. Half a year of lying to my face. I grabbed my whiskey and downed the rest in one gulp. Eric finally looked up, guilt all over his face. I swear, man, I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. I stared at him. It just happened? That's not what I meant. I exhaled, shaking my head. You're pathetic. He flinched. I stood up. We're done, Eric. You and me? Done? His eyes widened. Wait, man. I walked out. I had one more person to deal with. Lisa. When I got home, Lisa was waiting in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. She looked up and smiled. Hey, babe. How was your night? I gripped my phone in my pocket. I walked up to her, pulled out the phone, and threw it onto her lap. The screen lit up with the pictures. Her smile vanished. Her hands shook as she picked up the phone, scrolling through the evidence of her betrayal. Her mouth opened, closed. I stood over her, watching her fall apart. Say something, I said coldly. She looked up, eyes wide with panic. Jason, don't. I held up a hand. Don't even try to lie. Tears filled her eyes. I never meant for you to find out like this. I laughed. Oh, so you were just going to keep screwing my best friend behind my back forever? She flinched. I took a deep breath. Then, I looked her right in the eyes and said the words that sealed her fate. Pack your things. We're done. She gasped. Jason, please. I turned and walked away. She ran after me, grabbing my arm. Jason, we can fix this. I love you. I yanked my arm free. No, Lisa. You love yourself. Tears streamed down her face. I made a mistake. No, I shook my head. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. You made a choice. And now you get to live with it. She sobbed. Where am I supposed to go? I stared at her. Then I smirked. Why don't you ask Eric? Her face crumbled. And that was the last thing I saw before I walked out the door. For good. I didn't look back. Not when Lisa sobbed my name. Not when she begged me to stay. Not when she collapsed onto the couch, shaking. I walked out that door and shut it behind me. And just like that, our marriage was over. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, my heart still racing. For months, I had lived with a lie. For months, I had been blind, clueless, a fool. But not anymore. Now I was free. Or at least I should have been. Then why? Why did I still feel like shit? I closed my eyes, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. My wife. My best friend. 6 months. I had been betrayed in the worst possible way. And yet, even now, a twisted part of me still loved her. Pathetic. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my mind. I needed to leave. I didn't want to stay in town. Not in the same place where Lisa and Eric had their little secret affair. I needed distance. I needed air. I started the engine and drove. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. I just needed to get away. I found myself in a motel 2 towns over. A shitty place with flickering lights, paper-thin walls, and a bed that smelled like cheap detergent. But at least it was mine. No Lisa. No Eric. No memories. Just me, my thoughts, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. I had been drinking too much, sleeping too little. Every night, I lay awake, replaying everything. Every kiss, every touch, every lie. And then there were the texts. From Lisa: Jason, please just talk to me. I love you. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Please don't throw everything away. From Eric: I never meant to hurt you, man. Please just let me explain. You were my best friend. I f***ed up. I know I did. But please, don't hate me. I ignored them all. I had nothing left to say. Until one text changed everything. I'm pregnant. I stared at the screen, my blood turning ice cold. Pregnant? No. 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 This had to be a lie. I wanted to believe it was a trick, a desperate attempt to pull me back. But Lisa wasn't stupid. She knew this was the one thing I would never ignore. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Is it mine? I hesitated, then deleted it. Instead, I typed, "We need to talk." She responded instantly. "Please, Jason. Come home." Home. The place I had walked away from. The place she had turned into a lie. I clenched my jaw. I didn't want to go back. But I had to. Because if she was telling the truth, then this wasn't over. Not even close. I parked outside, staring at the house that used to be mine. It felt different now. Smaller. Colder. Like a place I no longer belonged to. Lisa must have been waiting, because the moment I stepped out of the car, she ran to me. "Jason." I held up a hand. Inside. Her face fell, but she nodded. We went inside, sitting at the kitchen table. The same table where we had eaten breakfast every morning. But today we were strangers. I folded my arms. "Talk." She swallowed hard. "I found out a few days ago. I took 3 tests. I said nothing." She looked down. "I swear, Jason, I never wanted this to happen. Is it mine?" The words hung between us like a loaded gun. Her breath caught. "Of course it's yours." I narrowed my eyes. "You sure about that?" Tears welled in her eyes. I would never lie about something like this. I wanted to believe her. But how could I trust a liar? "Get a test," I said flatly. She blinked. "What?" "A paternity test," I said. "Right now. Call a doctor. Set it up." She hesitated. And that hesitation? That was enough. My stomach twisted. I clenched my fists. "It's not mine, is it?" She shook her head frantically. "Jason, is it mine?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know." And just like that, something inside me snapped. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. Lisa reached for me, but I pulled away. "I swear, Jason, I thought it was yours." I laughed. A broken, hollow laugh. "You don't even know?" She sobbed. It's either yours or... She stopped. She didn't have to finish the sentence. It was either mine, or Eric's. My hand shook. I took a slow, deep breath. Then I looked her dead in the eyes. We're done? Her face crumbled. Please, Jason. I mean it, Lisa. I stepped back. You wanted him? You got him. She let out a choked sob. I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, she whispered, I love you. I froze. Then, without looking back, I said the last words I would ever say to her. No, Lisa, you love yourself. And then, I walked out. For the last time, I moved to another city. Started over. I got a new apartment, a new job, a new life. I didn't check up on Lisa. I didn't check up on Eric. They were ghosts now. I didn't care what happened to them. Until one night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. I answered. Silence. Then, a familiar, broken voice. Jason, it's me. Lisa. I clenched my jaw. What do you want? A pause. Then, I got the test results. My stomach dropped. I stayed silent. She inhaled sharply. It's not yours. I closed my eyes. I already knew the answer. But hearing it, it still hurt. I let out a slow breath. Congratulations, Lisa. She sobbed. Jason, please. I ended the call. And this time, I blocked her number. For good. Because now, I was truly free. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the city around me. The whiskey bottle on the passenger seat remained untouched. Not because I didn't want to drink, but because I needed to keep my mind clear for what I was about to do. I had spent years trusting Eric. He had been my brother in all but blood, the man who had stood by me during my toughest moments. We had shared victories, defeats, secrets, and dreams. And now, after everything, I couldn't shake the image of his hands on my wife, the hushed whispers between them when they thought no one was listening. It was disgusting. It was wrong. And it was a betrayal I would never forgive. I knew I couldn't just sit here all night, replaying it over and over. I needed answers. I needed to hear his excuse, no matter how pathetic it would be. I grabbed my phone, scrolled to Eric's name, and pressed call. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then he picked up. Hey man, what's... Cut the bullshit, Eric. My voice was sharp, dangerous. We need to talk. Now. There was a pause. A long one. Then a sigh. I figured you'd call. Of course he did. Where are you? I demanded, my fingers digging into my leg. Another pause. Then my place. You coming here? Or do you want me to meet you somewhere? I clenched my jaw. I didn't trust myself in public. I'm coming over. And with that, I hung up. Eric lived in a high-rise downtown, a place that screamed money and status. The kind of place I once thought was impressive until now. As I walked into the lobby, the doorman greeted me, but I barely acknowledged him. I took the elevator to the 20th floor, my mind spinning. By the time the doors opened, my pulse was hammering against my ribs. Eric's apartment door was already slightly open. He was waiting for me. I stepped inside. The air smelled like expensive cologne and whiskey-soaked guilt. Eric stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, drink in hand, staring at the city below. When he turned around, there was something different in his eyes. Regret. That pissed me off even more. He gestured toward the couch. Sit down? I didn't. Instead, I walked up to him, and before he could say another word, I swung. My fist collided with his jaw, sending his glass crashing to the floor. He stumbled back, gripping his face, his eyes wide with shock. You deserve that, I growled. He wiped his mouth, nodding slightly. Yeah, I did. That only fueled my rage. That's it? I snapped. You're just going to admit it? No excuses? No pathetic attempt to lie. Eric exhaled, rubbing his temples. I won't insult you by pretending there's an excuse. But I swear, I never planned for this to happen. I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah? Then tell me, Eric. How exactly did you accidentally end up screwing my wife? He hesitated. I stepped closer, my body coiled with anger. Say it, Eric. Say it out loud. His shoulders slumped. It started months ago. My stomach dropped. Months. Not a mistake. Not a moment of weakness. A full-blown affair. I turned away, gripping the edge of the bar counter. The room tilted for a second, my vision blurred by rage. I swear, man, Eric continued. It wasn't about hurting you. I spun back around. You didn't think about me at all. If you had, you wouldn't have done it. He had no response. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So, what now? You gonna be with her? Play house with the woman you stole from me? Eric looked away. I don't know. That was the final nail in the coffin. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. My hands trembled as I reached for my keys. I needed to get out of here before I did something I'd actually regret. But before I left, I turned back to him one last time. You can have her, Eric. My voice was low, controlled, but venomous. But just know you lost me. I slammed the door behind me, and I never looked back. I drove through the city, hands clenched around the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, a chaotic, tangled mess of anger, pain, and disbelief. I had always thought betrayals like this happened to other people. Not to me. I had spent years building a life with my wife. I had trusted Eric like a brother. And now, both of them had ripped everything away from me without a second thought. I couldn't go home, Not yet, Not while my house still smelled like her, like us, like a marriage that had been alive for months. So instead, I drove. I had no destination in mind, just the need to escape. To get as far away from the memory of what I had just learned. The city lights blurred past me, neon streaks cutting through the darkness. 1,000 memories flooded my mind, each one now tainted by the realization that, during those moments, she had already chosen someone else. The weekend getaways where I thought we were reconnecting, The nights she claimed she was too tired, The little moments of distance I had brushed off as nothing. It had all been leading up to this. I gritted my teeth, slamming the gas pedal down. The engine roared in response, pushing me faster, farther. But no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't outrun the truth. Somewhere around midnight, I pulled into a random parking lot. The sign above read 24-hour diner, its fluorescent lights flickering weakly in the night. I needed a drink, something strong. But alcohol wouldn't fix this. Not really. I stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling as I entered. The place was mostly empty, except for an old man hunched over a plate of pancakes and a tired-looking waitress cleaning the counter. I slid into a booth at the back, rubbing my temples. A few moments later, the waitress appeared. "What can I get you?" she asked, chewing gum lazily. I hesitated. "Just coffee." She raised a brow, but didn't question it, scribbling something on her notepad before walking off. I let out a breath, staring out the window. The streets were empty now, save for the occasional passing car. Everything felt eerily quiet, like the world itself had paused just for me to sit in my misery. My phone buzzed. I tensed. Kate. I stared at the screen, the notification burning into my vision like a brand. Her messages had started coming in hours ago, but I had ignored every single one. I wasn't ready. Not to hear her voice. Not to listen to whatever bullshit excuse she was going to throw at me. But this time, the message was different. "Kate, please come home. We need to talk." I exhaled sharply. I should have deleted it. Should have thrown my phone across the table and ignored her forever. But I didn't. Instead, I stared at those words, a part of me aching at how familiar they felt. Come home. For years, home had been her. Us. And now, that home was nothing but a shattered illusion. The waitress returned with my coffee, setting it down with a small clink. "Rough night." I let out a hollow laugh. "You have no idea." She smirked, wiping her hands on her apron. "I've seen a lot of men come in here looking like you. Wife problems." I blinked. "Yeah." She leaned against the counter. "Well, whatever it is, don't let her talk her way out of it. Women like that, they're real good at twisting words." I nodded absently, but the truth was, I already knew that. Kate would try to manipulate me. She'd try to make me feel like this was my fault. But I wasn't that stupid. I picked up my coffee, taking a slow sip. The bitterness settled deep in my chest, grounding me. Then, before I could stop myself, I picked up my phone And I called her. The phone barely rang twice before she answered. Jason. Just my name. But the way she said it, soft, desperate, sent a sharp pang through my chest. I said nothing. Please. She exhaled shakily. Please come home. Let me explain. I squeezed my eyes shut. Explain? I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Explain how you spent months sneaking around with my best friend? She choked on a sob. I never meant to hurt you. I clenched my jaw. I didn't want to hear this. You need to leave, I said flatly. Silence. Then what? You heard me. I bit out. Get out of my house, Kate. Pack your shit and leave. More silence. Then her voice shifted from desperate to cold. Where do you expect me to go? I laughed bitterly. I don't give a damn. Go to Eric's. You two are perfect for each other. Jason, please. Don't do this. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone. I let out a slow breath, setting it down beside my coffee. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was emptiness. I sat in that diner for over an hour, staring at my coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. The conversation with Kate kept replaying in my head, but no matter how many times I went over it, one thing was clear. There was no going back. I had cut her off. I had ended it. But why did it still feel like I was the one who lost? I ran a hand down my face. The waitress, whose name tag read Lena, passed by again, her eyes scanning me like she was debating whether or not to say something. You look like a man who just torched his whole life, she finally said. I let out a humorless chuckle. Is something like that? She grabbed a fresh pot of coffee and refilled my cup. You thinking about going back? No, I said immediately. She smirked. Good. Because I've seen guys like you before. The ones who walk in here looking like their whole damn world just got ripped apart. Half of them leave this place and go crawling back to the woman who did it. I shook my head. That's not me. Hope not, she said, leaning on the counter. Because if she cheated once, she'll do it again. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next year. But it'll happen. Her words settled in my chest like a weight I didn't want to carry. Because the worst part was, I knew she was right. Kate hadn't just made a mistake. She had made a choice that lasted for months. How the hell was I ever supposed to trust her again? I wasn't, and I wouldn't. I exhaled sharply, pushing the coffee away. I need to get out of here. Lena shrugged. Long as it's away from her, I'd say that's the right move. I left the diner and drove around aimlessly for a while. My mind too clouded to focus on anything but the betrayal that had just flipped my entire life upside down. But as I drove past the familiar streets, past the places where Kate and I had shared memories that now felt like a sick joke, my car seemed to steer itself. It wasn't until I pulled into the driveway that I realized where I had gone. Eric's house. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I shouldn't be here. But at the same time, how could I not be? Kate's betrayal had shattered me. But Eric's? That was something else entirely. He had been my best friend, my brother in everything but blood. And yet, he had spent months sneaking around with my wife, looking me in the eye, pretending like everything was fine. Rage coiled in my stomach like a wild animal. I needed to face him, Dot. I needed answers, Dot. I needed to look him in the eye and see if he even felt guilty. I stepped out of the car and marched toward the front door, my pulse hammering in my ears. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I clenched my fists and turned to leave when a sound, a low shuffling noise from inside. I frowned, stepping closer. Eric, I called, my voice hard and yielding. I know you're in there. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps, slow, hesitant. The door cracked open an inch, revealing Eric's face. For a second, we just stood there, staring at each other. And then, just like that, I saw it. Not just guilt, but fear. What the hell do you want? He asked, his voice hoarse. I let out a dry laugh. Seriously? That's the question you're asking me? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Jason, listen. No, I snapped. You don't get to talk. Not until you tell me the truth. His jaw clenched. What truth? You and Kate. Something flashed across his face, panic. I took a step closer. How long? He hesitated. Tell me the truth, Eric. Because if you lie to me right now, I swear to God. 6 months. He cut in, his voice barely above a whisper. I staggered back like he had just punched me. 6 months. Not a one-time thing. Not a moment of weakness. Half a damn year. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was sick. You really went behind my back for 6 months? I asked, shaking my head. And you still had the nerve to act like my friend? Eric sighed. Jason. Shut up. My voice exploded out of me. You don't get to say my name like that. You don't get to stand there and pretend like you're sorry. He opened his mouth, but I wasn't finished. You could have told me, I said, my voice trembling. If you had come to me like a man, if you had admitted it, maybe I wouldn't be standing here, thinking about how much I want to break your damn face. His lips parted slightly, but he didn't say anything. Because he knew. He knew there was nothing he could say to fix this. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Do you love her? I asked. His eyes widened slightly. Jason, do you love her? A long, tense silence. And then, yes, that was it. The final nail in the coffin. I nodded slowly, stepping back. Good. Eric frowned. What? You love her? I smiled bitterly. Then you can have her. His face paled. I turned on my heel and walked away. He didn't try to stop me. Because he knew. He had already lost me forever. I didn't go home that night. I drove to a motel outside of town, booked a room, and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. Sleep didn't come. Only one thought repeated over and over in my mind. I had lost everything, but somehow I felt lighter. Because if there was one thing I knew for sure, I would never let them break me again. I woke up the next morning with a splitting headache and a hollow feeling in my chest. The motel room smelled like stale air and bad decisions. The curtains were barely drawn, letting in slivers of harsh morning light that made my head throb even more. I hadn't slept much, barely at all. All I could do was lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the motel's broken AC unit. Eric's voice still echoed in my head. Yes, that one damn word. That one word that proved he hadn't just ruined my life. He had built something from its wreckage. With her, I sat up, rubbing a hand over my face. My phone sat on the nightstand, the screen cracked, filled with missed calls and unread messages. I already knew who they were from. I didn't care. I grabbed the phone, held down the power button, and shut it off completely. Enough. I was done. I took a long, scalding shower, letting the water burn away the numbness creeping into my bones. I needed to get away, not just from Kate and Eric, but from everything. The memories, the rage, the betrayal. I needed a new start, a place where I wouldn't constantly be reminded of what they did to me. I packed up my things, left the motel key on the nightstand, and stepped outside. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of damp pavement. The town was waking up, cars rolling through the streets, coffee shops opening, people completely oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just collapsed. I slid into my car, gripping the wheel. I had two choices: stay or disappear. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't in my hometown anymore. I wasn't even in the same state. I had driven for hours, across highways, past towns I'd never heard of, until I found myself somewhere that felt distant enough. It was a small, quiet town nestled between the mountains. No city noise, no reminders of my past, just me and a fresh start. I checked into a cheap motel, this time with no intention of checking out the next morning. I needed time to figure out who the hell I was without them, time to figure out what came next. Because one thing was clear, I wasn't the same man I was before. I had been a husband, a best friend, a man who trusted too easily. But now, I didn't know what the hell I was anymore, and maybe that was a good thing. I found a job. It wasn't glamorous, just some mechanic work at a local garage, but it kept my hands busy, kept my mind from spiraling into the past. I rented a small apartment above a diner. The walls were thin, the water pressure sucked, but it was mine. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. But the past had a way of creeping back in. It always did. I should have known they wouldn't leave me alone forever. I had blocked their numbers. I had cut them out completely. But some people don't know how to let go. The first time I saw her name pop up on my new phone, I almost laughed. Kate. I ignored it. Then came the emails. The long, rambling apologies. The desperate pleas. I didn't read them. I didn't even open them. But then, she showed up, in my town, at my job, like I had just gone out for a pack of cigarettes, and she had been waiting for me to come back. I was elbow deep in an engine when I heard the soft chime of the shop's entrance bell. I didn't look up, not until I heard her voice. Jason. My blood turned to ice. I straightened slowly, wiping my hands on a rag before turning around. And there she was, Kate, standing in the doorway, looking like she had aged 10 years in a month. Her eyes were puffy. Her hair was disheveled. Her clothes were wrinkled, like she had driven here without stopping. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice like stone. She took a shaky breath. I've been looking for you. I laughed coldly. Guess you finally found me. Congratulations. Now leave. She flinched. Jason, please. No. Her lip trembled. Just hear me out. I crossed my arms. Why? She swallowed hard. Because I can't live with this. With what I did to you. I shook my head. Not my problem. Tears welled in her eyes. Jason, please, You did this, Kate. You don't get to show up here and act like you're the victim. She wiped at her face. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I need you to know that I regret it. I let out a bitter chuckle. You regret it? What part, Kate? The part where you lied to my face every day for 6 months? Or the part where I caught you in our bed with him? She sobbed. I was weak. I was lonely. And I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. I snapped. A mistake is missing a phone call. What you did, that was a choice. She let out a choked sob, covering her mouth. I exhaled, shaking my head. What do you want from me, Kate? Huh? You want me to forgive you? Tell you it's all okay? That we could just go back to how things were? Her silence was all the answer I needed. I stepped closer, my voice deadly quiet. Go home, Kate? She hiccuped on a sob. Jason, please. I turned away. There's nothing left for you here. She lingered for a moment. Then, finally, she left. I watched from the garage window as she climbed into her car, her shoulders shaking. And as she drove away, disappearing down the road, I realized I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No pain. Just relief. Because Kate was my past, and I wasn't looking back. I stared at the door, my breath slow and controlled, but inside, I was burning. I could still hear their muffled voices from inside the house. My wife, my best friend, the two people I trusted most in the world, whispering behind my back like I was some fool. I wasn't a fool, Not anymore. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of everything that had led me here. The late nights, the suspicious glances, the lies. All of it had brought me to this moment. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. Slowly, I turned the doorknob. The door creaked open, and they both turned to look at me. Frozen. Guilty. My wife's face went pale. My best friend, if I could still call him that, stiffened like a deer caught in headlights. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then, she had the audacity to say it. Jason, it's not what you think. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Not what I think. I stepped further inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. The tension in the room was suffocating. I could see the panic in her eyes, the way she clutched at her robe as if covering herself would erase the betrayal. My so-called best friend shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't speak. Coward. I took a slow, deep breath, trying to keep my rage from exploding. Okay, I said, my voice eerily calm. Then tell me, what am I thinking? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Exactly. I exhaled through my nose, my jaw tight. I had spent weeks, months trying to deny this, trying to believe in her. But now, there was no doubt left. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I murmured, unlocking the screen. It's funny. She swallowed hard. What is? I smirked. Press play. The recording started. Their voices. Their whispers. Her breathless laughter. His deep, hushed tone. Every Single. Word. My wife's eyes widened in horror. My best friend went sheet white. I let the audio play for a few more seconds, just enough for them to realize they were completely screwed before I stopped it and tucked my phone back into my pocket. The silence that followed was deafening. She started, but I held up a hand. No, I said, shaking my head. No more excuses. She blinked rapidly, her eyes welling with tears. But I felt nothing die. No pity, no sadness, just a cold, quiet emptiness. I turned my gaze to my so-called best friend. You, I muttered, my voice low. He tensed. You were my brother, I whispered. And you threw it all away. For what? His lips parted, but nothing came out. Pathetic. I took a slow step back, looking at them one last time. Then I smiled. Not a warm, forgiving smile. A cold, knowing smile. They had no idea what was coming. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. You're leaving? She called, her voice breaking. I paused. Then, without looking back, I said, no, sweetheart. I'm just getting started. And with that, I walked out, leaving their perfect little lie in ruins. If you were in my position, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Or would you make them regret it? Let me know in the comments below.